Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about a remarkable book, and this book is called Tao Te Ching. We are born with desires. We hope to be happy, to receive love, and have freedom. From this, many methods have emerged. For example, teaching how to gain love and freedom, or how to pursue money, status, and other things. But in practice, we find that while some methods may be correct, there are simply too many of them for us to learn and apply. So if there a single method, if we follow it, could allow us to gain all of these things? The answer is yes. Because our universe is abundant, everything we desire can actually be tracked back to the very moment of the universe's creation, to that primordial chaos, that source code from which everything arises. But this requires a person, someone who must have seen the divine, who must know what the universe's source code is, and who is also willing to tell you. So, does such a person exist? Yes, he does. It's Lao Tzu. He dictated a book called Tao Te Ching. In fact, according to the silk manuscript version of Tao Te Ching, unearthed at Ma Wangdui in 1973, its original title should have been De Tao Ching. But since the name most familiar to people is Tao Te Ching, we will continue to call it that. According to modern physics, our universe was born out of nothing, born from a single point. From nothing emerged the Big Bang, an enormous explosion, and in an instant, the universe was formed. This corresponds precisely to what Lao Tzu said: being arises from non-being. If the universe truly came into being in this way, then there must exist a universe formula, just like the one physicists have long pursued, a formula that can explain all things in the cosmos. And this formula would be the law that everything in the universe must follow. In other words, it is the underlying code of our existence, what we might call the source code. And this source code must be entirely different from all the formulas we've currently derived. By now, you can see the premise of our assumption that Lao Tzu knew all of this, or rather, that Lao Tzu truly did know all of this. Why do I say this? Because if he did not know, he could never have written such words. Before we start discussing Tao Te Ching, let's first get a general understanding of this. Tao Te Ching was written by Lao Tzu, a philosopher from the state of Chu during the spring and autumn period. It was compiled between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE and is one of the greatest classics of China. Up to now, its translations are second only to the Bible worldwide. It is praised as a source of Chinese culture, the king of all classics. The entire book contains just over 5,000 characters, yet it embodies infinite wisdom and the truth of the universe. From this perspective, it is the answer to all questions. Your explanation will primarily use the Ma Wangdui silk manuscript version. Why? Because the silk manuscript dates back to the early Western Han dynasty, 400 to 600 years earlier than the commonly circulated versions, making it closer to Lao Tzu's own era. Secondly, the silk manuscript was circulated internally among the nobility, so it is more authoritative and has fewer alterations. However, some parts of the silk manuscript are missing, so we'll also refer to the standard version to maintain completeness. Before making this episode, I consulted many translations, striving to present the most reliable and comprehensible interpretations. Of course, there will be also some slightly mystical interpretations, as well as some of my own understanding. In terms of the explanation order, we will still follow the structure of the standard version. First, the Tao chapter. In this episode, we will start from the origin, After listening, you may gain new wisdom or even glimpse the mysteries of the universe. Now let us calm our minds and open the Tao Te Ching. Let's look at the silk manuscript version. At first glance, the two versions seem almost the same, except the silk manuscript version has one extra word, ye. But precisely because of the extra ye, their meanings become very different. The common version means the Tao that can be expressed in words is now the unchanging eternal Tao. In other words, Tao cannot be spoken of. But the silk manuscript's interpretation is Tao can be spoken of, and it can also be followed in practice. It's just that the Tao you speak of is not the eternal Tao. But why is it that the Tao we can express or follow is not the eternal Tao? That's because Tao is something that transcends language. Tao belongs to a higher dimension. It cannot be fully described by language. It's like listening to music or appreciating a piece of art. You can use words to describe it, but no matter how elegant the words are, they can't describe the feeling you actually had in that moment. So it is with Tao. It cannot be truly captured in words, but must be experienced and perceived directly. So we cannot use language to describe the Tao. That's why Lao Tzu said, "Nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. Named, it is the mother of all things." Thus, it has no name. We just forcibly give it a name, calling it Tao. Therefore, to understand the Tao, we must feel it and sense it, just as we approach painting or music. Only by listening, by immersing yourself, by standing before the canvas, can you truly perceive it. From another perspective, even nothingness, Wu, arises from Tao. Tao itself is higher than Wu. Wu here means nothing. Lao Tzu believes that everything arises from nothing. That is why Lao Tzu said, Tao gives birth to one, one gives birth to two, two gives birth to three, three gives birth to all things. And every Tao we discuss and admire is just one branch among many. But the true source, the constant Tao or the eternal Tao, can never be described in words. That is why it is said, the Tao that can be spoken of is now the constant Tao. At this point, some might ask, since the Tao is so mysterious, what use is it for us to understand it? Of course, it is useful, because of the Tao is the answer to all questions. This brings us back to what we said at the beginning. Everyone has desires. So is there a way such that as long as we follow the correct path, we can obtain all of these things? That correct path is the Tao, which is why it is translated into English as the way. In fact, in our daily lives, the Tao is everywhere. Although we cannot express the Tao in words, we can describe what a person who follows the Tao is like. When a person truly lives according to the Tao, their inner self gradually becomes calm and is no longer disturbed by external things. From this perspective, a person who has attained the Tao is certainly resolute and calm within. They understand that everything operates according to the rules of the Tao. They only need to observe and follow the Tao accordingly. Such people often do not show off, yet they reveal their wisdom at critical moments. They are seldom controlled by their emotions. Their inner world is like the depths of the ocean. Even when fierce winds blow outside, their hearts remain calm like still water. This is because Lao Tzu also said, great sound is seldom heard. Great form has no shape. A person who has attained the Tao is like this. They are humble, do not need to show off, because their strength comes from within. They do not need to bluff or exaggerate. If you look at the great sages in history, you will have this kind of feeling. Of course, if you set aside the so-called flashy celebrities, you'll find that those whose influence has lasted for thousands of years. Of course, if we set aside the so-called flashy celebrities, you'll find that those whose influence has lasted for thousands of years, even when many people we consider famous today are forgotten, are still remembered. Those people certainly were not particularly ostentatious. Their power was a stabilizing force. Their power did not come from persuasion, nor did it come from showing off themselves. They do not compete over temporary gains or losses. They are like the ocean, embracing our rivers, because they truly understand that real victory is not about momentary wins or losses, but about aligning with the natural order. Therefore, as long as these people exist, they naturally become a center of order. And this steadfastness comes from knowing that they are on the right path, which makes them open-minded, composed, and more likely to achieve true accomplishment. So if you want your life to no longer be swayed by noise, to no longer be restless, but instead to find steadfastness and clarity in a chaotic world, you really need to read Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. Now, having talked about many of the merits of the Tao Te Ching, let's return to today's topic. The Tao that can be spoken of is now the eternal Tao. In fact, this also reminds us that when handling matters, we should approach them from a higher dimensional perspective. From a low dimensional perspective, we always want one single correct answer. For example, how one should study, how one should achieve success, or what one should eat to be healthy. Once we have these fixed answers, we feel reassured. But the problem is, the world is changing, and life itself is diverse. If you try to confine the Tao with one sentence or one method, it is like using a 2D approach to solve a 3D problem. You will never fully resolve it. If you cling only to a fixed method, what you see will always be a higher dimensional projection onto a lower dimension, never the complete picture. Of course, doing so can never bring you any closer to the Tao. So this also tells us that when solving concrete daily matters, we need to jump out the box, see a bigger picture from a higher perspective. The simplest way to achieve this higher dimensional perspective is to extend the timeline. For example, when many people look for a job, they focus only on one line, whether the salary is high and whether the benefits are good. This approach is actually very limited because a high salary does not mean you will grow, and a good benefit do not mean you will be happy. So nowadays, many people earn high salaries but feel increasingly empty inside, even depressed. Higher dimensional thinking means stepping beyond the immediate benefits and seeing your long-term value. You need to ask yourself, can this job allow me to utilize my strength? Can this job help me become a more complete person? Does this job align with the direction of my life? The higher dimensional perspective here is that when you shift your focus from immediate money to your overall life direction, you won't be repeatedly tangled. Instead, you will find the path that belongs to you. This is the meaning of your own Tao. The path others can walk may not necessarily be the one you can walk. Only when you see the farther horizon, even the potential outcomes, can you walk on your own Tao, walking with peace of mind and composure. Simply put, this type of higher dimensional thinking is to view the current difficulties you face within the context of your entire life. If life is a line segment, it has a starting point and an end point. We cannot choose the starting point. And what about the end point? Think. If you continue like this, will it lead to the end point you desire? If the answer is yes, Then continue walking, because you are on the path you want, the path that is your own Tao. If the answer is no, then you must feel constrained and conflicted inside, and sooner or later, you will make adjustments. From this perspective, what kind of person is more likely to achieve results? Of course, it's the person who follows the light in their own heart. And this kind of achievement is often not measured by money or status. The Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. Also remind us not to be confined by words or fixed methods. You will find that many people say success can be replicated. You can copy someone else's success. Seeing others do well, we just follow what they do. For example, in content creation, you might chase trending topics just because others do, but the results achieved this way are often unsatisfactory. Let me share a story from my high school days. At that time, one of my classmates suddenly made rapid progress in learning English, visibly improving at an incredible speed. So I asked him, "Why are you learning so well and so quickly?" He told me, "Make flashcards with the word and its phonetics on the front and example sentences on the back, and that's it. Or buy a book like this." He said he just used this method. When I tried it, it didn't work at all. Later, I realized I belong to the type who must understand things themselves. I need to know how the word is constructed in order to remember it. So we must choose what suits ourselves. We can't just take someone else's method and copy it. For example, psychology now classifies people as intuitive types or sensing types. So if you make a sensing type learn from an intuitive type, or vice versa, do you think that's practical? This also reminds us that we must find our own Tao, not follow others, because you two are not necessarily the same kind of being. In reality, there are too many examples like this. We often imitate others, hoping to copy their work, but it rarely works out well. So this reminds us that we must understand ourselves. You must first understand yourself to know which direction suits you. Understanding yourself is like having a compass in your heart that knows which direction to go. Those who do not understand themselves often follow trends blindly, ultimately wasting a lot of time. But perhaps this is something we all must experience in life. Moreover, the Tao discussed here is definitely not like in textbooks, where there is only one correct answer. Our true Tao is meant to be perceived and contemplated, to work with it, and it is constantly refined. What we truly need to comprehend is not the definition of the Tao, but the spirit behind it. There is a saying, "Those who have succeeded once often find it harder to achieve a second success." Or in other words, those who have succeeded find it harder to make changes. This is because they fall into a state of attachment. They believe that success once achieved can be replicated. For example, I used to know many business owners who run large enterprises, and they believe that the methods that worked before still work now. And precisely because they succeeded before, they cling to them. They think, "I succeeded before. You haven't. Why should I listen to you?" They are attached, believing they are right, or that the methods they stick to are correct. In reality, they treat these methods as a universal key, but they forget that the situation now is completely different. The old key no longer opens the current lock. So this is also the meaning. The Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. Regarding this, Lao Tzu actually said, "Hold today's Tao to handle today's reality." Although the commonly used version says, "Hold ancient Tao to handle today's reality," the Ma Wangdui version says, "Hold today's Tao to handle today's reality." Now, let's discuss another interpretation of the Tao that can be spoken of as now the eternal Tao. The eternal Tao is like the source, while the various spoken Taos are like numerous tributaries. If we follow the tributaries, we can definitely reach the source. From this perspective, the Tao is not abstract. Moreover, Lao Tzu provides very detailed descriptions of the Tao at different levels in the Tao Te Ching. We will discuss these one by one later. Subscribe to my channel and we'll grow and understand the Tao together. So see you in the next episode.